The Naboo Affair. =RK=. Interlude. For decades now, we've all heard and read speculations about the Separatists' grand offensive that ended one phase of the Clone Wars. The most talked about event is the Jedi coup launched on Coruscant. Many speculate how a different outcome of the coup or even its absence would have changed the war. The appeal is clear: in a conflict spanning the width and breadth of the galaxy, there are seldom single events that could significantly influence the outcome of such a war. The Jedi coup is one such occasion. The primary speculations about it center around three main premises. 1. The Jedi remaining loyal, which has the potential for the greatest impact. 2. The coup is discovered before it launches and Chancellor Palpatine orders Order 66 executed preemptively. 3. The coup goes on as OTL, yet the Chancellor survives the assassination attempt that claimed his life. We'll begin with a summary of the most likely outcomes of the first scenario, best and worst scenarios alike. Without the Jedi coup, the first big change in the timeline is obvious. The clones aren't confused by conflicting orders that they were bred to obey. Admiral Yularen is able to bring the Republic's strategic reserve in play at Corellia. Then what? Some would tell you that the fleet's Admiral Trench of the Confederacy brought to bear against the Republic are crushed in short order. Next comes Kamino. Without a coup, there's no assassination attempt on General Vale by Jedi Masters Ran Sysis and Shark T. He wasn't left exhausted. There was no confusion and traitorous Jedi storming Tiboka City. It's very much possible that General Vale wasn't forced to utilize battle meditation at that battle, and even if he did, the countermeasure unleashed upon him by the Jedi wouldn't be in play. Kamino might hold for weeks, maybe even months. Perhaps long enough for the Republic to finish her new construction at Corellia and coup it, get those ships properly integrated in the Navy, their crews trained and only then sent into the fray. Unlikely what had to happen in OTL. Then it's not a stretch of the imagination that an unstoppable tide of Republic ships could fight its way to Naboo, which according to Republic loyalists would have held no matter what, Iriadu and even Kamino. After that the war was supposedly as good as won. We just outlined the best-case scenario, unlikely but certainly possible. However, many watching the records tend to see the blunders the Separatists did before their grand offensive, before the Confederacy Council took power and straightened up their command structure, and declare that if only there was no Jedi coup, victory would be not only inevitable but relatively easy. Others believe otherwise and paint a different picture. No Jedi coup. Admiral Yularen arrives to the rescue leading the Republic's strategic reserve as the cavalry of ancient legend. Then he and Jedi Master Plo Koon crush the dastardly enemy, right? Those who dedicated any serious time and effort in studying military history would not necessarily agree. Ever since the Clone Wars, it's been held as an indisputable fact that Admiral Trench was one of the best the Separatists had. Perhaps the best. He was certainly as good as any Republic commander you wish to name of the era. One thing that people usually forget or dismiss is a very important fact: the Confederacy knew that the Republic had reserves, roughly their size too, and that they would be dispatched the moment it was known where the primary blow was falling, either Corellia or coup it. Trench and his colleague planned to reduce Corellia's industry, defeat the forces commanded by Jedi Master Koon, and either bloody the Republic reserves before retreating once their job was done, or defeat them if the opportunity presented itself. We don't know how such fight would have been resolved for sure. However, there were certain wire games played by the Republic, Mandalorians and Empire in the aftermath of the Clone Wars that indicate that either side could have emerged victorious from Corellia. Declassified results show that while the odds of a comprehensive Republic defeat, meaning loss of spaceborne industry, Plo Koon's and Yularen's fleets were slim, such an outcome was still possible. There's one thing that all wargames agree upon: Admiral Trench had enough forces in the Corellian system to see the virtual annihilation of the industry, which was his primary strategic goal. How many ships he would have left at the end and what damage he could cause on the opposing fleets would depend on his and his counterparts' tactical decisions during the battle. Right now we're assuming the worst-case scenario for the Republic, a bad strategic loss at Corellia. Next, we go to Kamino. General Vale arrives there with the battle group centered upon the Corellian cruiser Freedom and needs to assist the friendly forces there in holding out for as long as possible. Bolstered by their strategic victory at Corellia, the Separatists might very well go all out to capitalize on that success. In order to do that, they need to secure their grasp of the core by eliminating any major threat to their rear areas. Ironically, even a bad loss at Corellia might have a similar effect. We know what happened after the burning of Camino. General Vale retreated with a significant number of surviving ships, laid low until he and his crews could mentally recover, and then went to reinforce first Eriadu then Naboo after raiding Darknul. During their flight from Camino, the survivors were being chased by at least twice their number of separatist ships which were unavailable for other operations. Here lays the rub. How many of those ships would have died in order to win at Camino if General Vale, Master Rancisis and their Gar counterpart had to stand and fight to the end at Camino? Would salvage a major part of the Republic forces there be possible without the chaos caused by the Jedi countermeasure for battle meditation upon the organic separatist commanders in system? That's a question with no good answer. Those few who know for sure keep silent to this day. So we have to assume, and as in this scenario the Republic isn't particularly lucky, while General Vale might be able to flee with his flagship the Freedom, it's unlikely he would be able to salvage enough of a force to matter. The consequences are obvious. Despite Gideon Tarkin's best efforts, Eriadu falls in a short order, and then Admiral Tigellinus is left at Naboo, an untenable situation. The Separatists managed to secure most of the galaxy despite suffering significant losses in the process, and it's questionable if even someone as revered as Chancellor Sheev Palpatine could hold a so crippled Republic together, much less win the war. At the very least we're looking at a divided galaxy between a rump Republic based in the core and a Confederacy holding most of the galaxy. At best that's a recipe for another war once both sides recover from the conflict. Most likely, the truth is somewhere between those two extremes. Without the coup, the war would have hinged on the outcome of Corellia, Camino, and what happened to Eriadu and the Midrim. There were too many variables to say for certain who would have emerged victorious. What we know is that both sides had a chance to win, depending on how you define victory, no matter if the Jedi launched their coup or not. One thing is certain, without the coup, the political situation would have been different and we might be living in a very different galaxy. Next we'll examine the best and worst case scenarios if the Jedi coup was discovered before it could be launched. Speculative History of the Clone Wars. Noreen Kavar, Zerka Publishing House. =RK=. Part 9. Audience Chamber. Royal Palace. Theed. Naboo. I had no idea where Tarkin was going with his train of though. I had no plan about this meeting, only a pair of vague goals. The first was to garner enough reasonable doubt in people's minds and hearts about what happened at Camino so I could continue to operate within Republic space without suddenly turning in public enemy number 1. Or perhaps 2 just after the Separatists. That was a marginal success. After all, the politicians gathered here had only my word to go by and Tarkin's support for my version of events. Every member of the fleet I got from Camino was going to back it up too, but that mattered but more and less than it might first appear. For many people in this room it didn't matter if I gave the order to torch Kuat and laughed at the pretty fireworks. There were some who wouldn't care if they knew for sure I felt everyone on the surface die and loved every moment of it. Enough of the people in the audience chamber were either opportunists, self-serving bastards, or simply desperate enough to deal even with the devil. Some were all of the above, or even genuinely good people who were against the wall looking for any way out for their worlds and people. My second goal here was to see if something could be done so at least some of the worlds in the region would continue to be a bleeding sore in the Separatist side, diverting resources from more important fronts. It wasn't nice, it wasn't how I would be presenting it to the locals, but it wasn't like I could do much for them. The logistics simply didn't work. If most of the present leaders decided that discretion was the better part of valor and either attempted to go neutral or threw their lot behind the enemy to avoid Confederate repressions, fighting our way through this region when, not if, we returned to kick the Separatists out would be a bloody affair that would waste too many resources and cause too much damage that had to be fixed later. Suppressing hostile population on former Republic worlds who now hated the Republic that abandoned them wasn't going to be fun. It could certainly be done, but if I ended up in charge of the pacification, what was left of my reputation would be shot to hell. Someone else might not be able to do what has to be done to secure the region, turning large chunks of the Midrim into a quagmire. That would be less than ideal, though depending on what happened on Coruscant since the coup, such a mess might have its benefits. It certainly aided my long-term goals of replacing the Republic with something useful. However, I was getting the nagging suspicion that Tarkin was ready to jump the gun, and this wasn't the time nor the place to show any division between us. Openly displaying such a weakness would cruff up our position even worse than it was and all but guarantee we wouldn't be able to do anything useful in the time we could afford to spend on Naboo. Tarkin, what the criff were you up to? Said bastard stood proudly and watched the people surrounding us with an inscrutable expression on his face. He had the unmistakable bearing of core nobility despite his family coming from Eriadu. I guess it's been so long that there were places on the mid-rim that were culturally hardly distinguishable from the old worlds in the core. In other aspects, they couldn't be more different. What Tarkin was talking about today, what we discussed back on Eriadu, would be anathema for most people in the core. Unless they were part of our little conspiracy with credible promises for money and power. Everything General Vale told us today is true to the best of my knowledge. I was at Kamino when the Jedi betrayed us. During his battle meditation I could experience his emotions, hear his thoughts. The General shared our agony. He hated experiencing every single death upon that world, and there were billions of them. If it wasn't for him we would have died at Kamino. The Separatist fleet that confronted us there would have proceeded to sack and capture Eriadu, and then the enemy would have struck Naboo with overwhelming force. Once Admiral Tigellinus' fleet was either destroyed or forced to retreat, this whole region of space would have been at the enemy's non-existent mercy. The sheer intensity and conviction in Tarkin's voice took me aback. The way he spoke was compelling you to believe him. If I didn't know better I would have thought he used the Force to enhance his voice. So? That's what's going to happen when you abandon us again. A CEO from Heth snapped. What do you expect us to do? Fight and die for people who don't give a damn about us? Why should we protect the interests of the core worlds while they scramble to secure Corellia while we're being abandoned? Almost everyone agreed. I could hear it in the way they shouted their support. The corona of conflicting emotions surrounding me made their feelings crystal clear. Only a few of them had any use for the Republic right now. They were on the verge of jumping ship, and the moment I gave the order to pull back from Naboo we might lose the whole mid-rim, not just this region of space. I ran basic strategies through my mind, half-backed plans. It didn't matter. Logistics was a harsh mistress. I could hurt the Separatists, perhaps bad enough to give them pause, but doing so would strand most of the fleet above us in the nearby sectors without sufficient ammunition. I would be forced to cannibalize and scuttle a lot of ships for supplies. In the grand scheme of things it would be a waste for dubious gain at best. I would lose time as well, and if Mandalore hadn't fallen yet it might before we could get to the eastern part of the galaxy. Ultimately I didn't have a reason to stand here and fight. Even doing so would mean my actions would help the Republic fragment. That could actually turn out to be a plus in the long run, though in the short to medium it was going to be a colossal pain in the ass. From a pure military perspective, abandoning you all is the correct course of action. It's going to be a political disaster, however doing so would help the Republic win the war, and when that's done none of you will have much of a choice. Those who decide to spare their worlds the horrors of war and those forced into accepting separatist terms will be declared traitors and collaborators. I told them. I had the feeling that Tarkin was using me as the proverbial bad cop and vessel to deliver the nasty truth while he was about to offer them salvation on one form or another. All I had to do was tell the truth while trying to figure some course of action that wouldn't result in a disaster. However, I was drawing blank. The only thing that had a prayer of working. Nah. That might very well see us branded as traitors. Tarkin couldn't possibly mean to. If we did this it might very well be more than the Republic cold bear. At the very least whoever ended up in charge of Gar at Coruscant, if it wasn't Obi-Wan, would see all Aiden forces recalled from Mandalore. Even Kenobi might be unable to stop it if he wants to retain his position. We weren't ready for such blatant open actions. Even if we were, this wasn't the time nor the place. The logistics would suck, and attempting what I began suspecting he had in mind might see us all dead for nothing. Besides, how many of the locals would agree anyway? Neutrality would be a very good alternative for some of them, if anyone decided to honor it anyway. I turned to stare at Tarkin, who gave me a tiny nod and began speaking. We know the situation our worlds are in. The Republic might as well be gone. For all we know it is gone or locked into inaction as it was during the Naboo crisis before Chancellor Palpatine was elected. Tarkin began outlining a proposal I was sure would end in the history books. It might very well damn us along with the Republic or be an unexpected blessing in disguise. It was going to be a huge complication for sure. He kept the crowd reasonably quiet by a sheer force of personality. Who knew he had it in him? At Eriadu, my family facilitated certain deals between the Gar, Corellia and Mandalore, represented by General Vale, and the various worlds and industrial interests supplying my homeworld with its defenses and the material needed to build them. While your worlds are in a worse position, the enemy has many more forces stationed in striking distance, making your position even more perilous. I believe I have a workable solution. It isn't a perfect one, nor one some of you would enjoy. However, it might just be enough to either keep the separatists off your worlds or allow us to liberate them. Tarkin's confidence was infectious. He had everyone's undivided attention. Right now Eriadu and the surrounding sectors are temporarily secure. I won't lie to you, my proposal is born of selfish reasons, because if it bears fruit it's the best chance to keep my home safe and protect yours too. We would hear your proposal, Admiral Tarkin. We would give it all due consideration and give you a decision here, today, if that's the recommendation of General Vale. He saved Naboo twice and we believe you two might save our home yet again. Queen Neapni spoke regally. It was good to know that I had at least one person in my corner in here besides Tarkin. Thank you, Your Majesty. I hope I won't disappoint. Tarkin bowed with a flourish, once again demonstrating his impeccable manners. Let us be the judge about that, Admiral. Please, speak. My proposition is deceptively simple, an alliance, both military and economic, aimed at protecting the Mid-Rim from any aggression. Tarkin dropped the bomb and the world literally stood still. It wasn't often I've heard such deafening silence within a room chock full with politicians, yet Tarkin managed to stun everyone. My mind spun exploring the implications. I would need to hear more details, but it suddenly became clear that Tarkin had been a very busy boy back on Eriadu. I should have kept a closer watch over him, or at least asked him some pointed questions. I knew he couldn't really move against me, however the way he was working to achieve my, or should I say our, long-term goals was interesting to say the least. I needed to hear more details. My first reaction was to dismiss his idea as a madness born by me messing with his mind on Kamino. However, there was a very slight possibility that it might work, at least in the short term, if we acted fast and were very lucky. That stunt he pulled at Darknell, was it just an opportunity he seized, or did he plan something like this since before we left Eriadu? I needed to have a heart-to-heart talk with him. If the locals didn't attempt to lynch us first, because what Tarkin just proposed was for all intents and purposes a secession not unlike what the separatists did before the war began. Oh, there were possibilities that might work in our favor, but the danger. A smile slowly crept up my face. I was a Sith. Since when did I run away from danger? The stunned silence broke and everyone began shouting questions and accusations at the same time. Tarkin bore the storm with aplomb and didn't let it visibly affect it. He stood beside me like a pillar, radiating utter confidence in his chosen course of action. I wish I could say I shared it. Things just became so much complicated it wasn't even funny. The Naboo Affair. =RK=. Part 10. Audience Chamber. Royal Palace. Feed. Naboo. For 15 minutes utter chaos reigned. Naboo's royal security closed ranks around the Queen, and my own escort butted their way through the raging mass of politicians, CEOs and advisors to fall into a protective ring around Tarkin and me. I spent the time tuning out the madness surrounding us and thought about my chief minion's stunt. It was pure madness, unrivaled its sheer insane audacity. It was an impossible, suicidal mission that nevertheless appealed to my warrior heart. Charging in against impossible odds, and damn the consequences. How many Sith got themselves killed that way again? The risk was insane. I should be kicking Tarkin back down to a regular crew member, arranging a meeting with a shrink for him, perhaps both. Just the political complications if this went through were mind-blowing. The military ones, honestly, pulling the operations needed to make such an alliance anything but a cautionary footnote in history, were going to be perhaps the greatest challenge I've faced as a commander. Everything I've learned over decades as a Sith told me that I should be choking Tarkin for being a bloody idiot. At the same time, I couldn't help it but appreciated the crooked, deranged mind that could have borne such an idea. I had my suspicions about what he would say if he got the chance to explain this alliance of his. Honestly, there weren't many options that had a prayer in hell of working. After Kamino, I think that I owed Tarkin at least hearing his proposal in full. Then I could go old-fashioned Sith on his ass if I didn't like what I heard. I might still do it even if he had a remotely workable plan in mind, because I would be the one facing the music if we lived to get back to Coruscant. Enough, I roared with a force-enhanced voice. My shout thundered around the chamber and everyone froze when I let a tiny bit of my presence be felt. Light leached off from the space surrounding me, and if anyone had any trouble believing that I was very much a Sith, Those doubts were dispelled as I glared at them with yellow shining eyes. If this is the pride of the Mid-Rim, I wonder why I should risk the ships and crews entrusted to me in order to protect you all, I hissed. My patience had very firm limits when dealing with politicians, and those imbeciles managed to reach them. It was a very good thing I didn't intend to crown myself as an emperor, otherwise the reign of terror I would unleash just to rid myself of the idiots currently running most of the galaxy would be spoken in hushed whispers for the next 10,000 years. I wish to hear Admiral Tarkin's proposition in full before deciding if he's one of the most brilliant men I've had the honor to meet or simply a raging madman. My voice snapped across the suddenly subdued chamber. People looked uneasy at each other as their breath escaped their lips in wisps of vapor. I reined in the dark side around me and a bit of warmth came back into the chamber. The lights shone brighter too, as there were no more barely controlled dark side energies absorbing their radiance. "Thank you, sir." Tarkin flashed me a polite smile and turned to look at the gathered worthies. "My propositions is simple. We will pool our resources, committing everything we've got left. That, combined with the presence of a Republic armada in orbit of Naboo, gives us the only chance we're likely to get to have a say in what happens to us here on the Rim. I can't promise you certain victory. Logistics is the harshest of mistresses. We might win every battle for as long as our supplies hold, but that would be for naught once we run out of them. However, Iriadu and the worlds on the Outer Rim and in the Western Quadrant standing behind us, when combined with everything you have left and the Republic assets in this system, are just enough to give us a chance to become traitors," someone shouted. "To prevent more worlds falling to the Separatists. To liberate some or perhaps all of your homes. To have a united voice in the Senate that couldn't be ignored." Tarkin ignored the jab. "You and the Sith told us that the logistics simply won't work." A CEO of Heth grumbled. "I know enough to agree with that sentiment. What you're proposing is a both political and possibly literal suicide. Under normal circumstances that might be true." Tarkin allowed. "The situation is far from normal. I don't speak about the usual, reasonable level of support that is expected by the Republic. If we are to stand a chance, I propose a full commitment. Every single hyperspace-capable vessel. Every crew member. Fully committing your industries to supporting the war effort so we could keep the Separatists as far away from our worlds as possible." Tarkin smiled crookedly. More shouts of disbelief followed, and even my baleful glare was slow in silencing them. "It's madness, right? There would be nothing left if we do that. So what? That's the choice all of us have right now. Either we all commit ourselves and our worlds in full, or we're left to the mercy of the Separatists. The Republic fleet currently at Naboo would be on its way to the core by this time tomorrow at the latest. In that case, this is the choice that I can give you. To fight not for a distant Republic currently cooped up into the core, but for your homes. For the Mid-Rim, just as my own people would fight to keep the enemy away from our own part of the Outer Rim. However, doing just that won't be enough, and we all know it. The Separatists are monsters. They proved it again and again here on Naboo. Simply standing by ourselves and resisting alone is a sure way to the grave or slavery in all but name, for no gain. Together we stand a chance, no matter how slim." Tarkin turned to face me and jabbed a finger at my chest. "Look at him. General Delcatar Vale, Dark Lord of the Sith. A monster who terrifies most of you. As he should. His credentials are war. His resume, a list of shattered fleets stretching from Ryloth to Geonosis, Gerantham, Iriadu, and today above this very world. With his military leadership, together we can achieve the impossible." This time the exclamation were of pure incredulity. "Everything?" I spoke, and my voice rang with the Force. "Full support, not the old games that crippled the war effort since day one?" I let my own incredulity creep into my tone. "If that incredible claim comes to pass, then there's a chance," I agreed. "There might be enough ships to be pressed into our logistics train across the Western Quadrant and here in the Mid-Rim to make such a bold proposal somewhat feasible. Could there be such a support even if enough of you agree to a full alliance here, today?" I asked, lacing my voice with enough disbelief that even an idiot would notice it. Because anything less would prompt me to continue with my original plan and leave. Anything else would make staying here for the campaign needed to secure the region a glorified suicide, though we would hurt the Separatists before our supplies ran dry. "I'll hear no more of this madness," Zurch snapped. "Are you all traitors?" he sneered. This insanity is nothing less than another separatist movement in the making. The Republic would never let it slide." I couldn't believe my ears. His outburst actually silenced the angry shouts that met my declaration. The angry and resentful mood shifted. The anger grew and the target changed from Tarkin and me to the Republic as a whole and Zurch himself. Really? The hegemon asked in a deceptively light tone. I found myself in agreement. The Republic would have a dim view of such an alliance as the one Admiral Tarkin proposes. That's actually a reason to give his idea a consideration given the situation. The Republic. He trailed off. How many of you believe that the only reason they have a whole armada here on Naboo was because Sheev Palpatine was local? This was the Chancellor's homeworld and that was the primary reason why the Republic deemed it important. Let's be honest for once. He smiled in amusement. The reason why most of us are here was to garner goodwill with Palpatine by aiding in the protection of his homeworld. Don't deny it. Not here and now, when we all know the truth. I'm an autocrat and can afford to actually tell the truth from time to time. He jested. What's your point, Mario? A long-suffered voice asked. We gathered here in the first place to form an informal alliance with Naboo. We all hoped that the Republic would move the heavens themselves in order to keep this world secure and thus give us a chance to state our cases and beg for help by whoever ended up in charge. A good word from our dearest host could have gone a long way in ensuring that. We all know how that turned out. The Chancellor is dead. There's no reason to believe that whoever was elected to replace him don't give a damn about what happens out here on the Rim. There hasn't been a single transmission from Coruscant for weeks now. We are on our own and now have to decide what to do. That's all I'm saying. Then why should we fight for a republic that abandoned us? Tarkin proposes that we fight for ourselves. Nice sentiment. He admits that his reasons to propose the alliance are selfish. So? Do you expect anything less? We're all selfish doing our best for our worlds or ourselves. That's no reason to dismiss his proposal. I want to hear more details. Me too. Cruff this, I won't hear any more of this lunacy. I agree. Coward. Your Majesty, may I propose that you clear the chamber of everyone but the various leaders and ambassadors? They might actually make a decision without so much distraction and I need their decision soon. It is irrelevant that this isn't how alliances and diplomacy are supposed to be conducted, I snapped at the ever-increasing volume of chatter. That's a capital idea, General. I beseech most of our guests to retreat to the gardens and relieve a bit of their stress. The Queen smiled beautifully at the gathered crowd. She wasn't thrilled at the circus happening in front of her throne. Now there was a tiny chance that this herd of crazy people might actually do something productive. I wondered should I support Tarkin's plan or tank it and make my way back home to Mandalore and then Coruscant. =RK=. Part 11. Audience Chamber. Royal Palace. Theed. Naboo. Getting the chamber emptied of the hangers-on took some time and not so careful prodding by the Queen's guards, but finally we were alone with the important people. Before this train wreck in the making can go on, please someone give me a good reason why should I commit my forces to this idea of yours, Tarkin. I understand, if it works it's going to be good for this part of the Mid and Outer Rim. Not so much for the Republic or Mandalore, I stated pointedly. Tarkin's plan does have potential, no matter how slim. It still doesn't tell me why I should risk everything to aid you and your people. We all know that the Senate would be content to leave you to your fate, and when the Republic is finally ready to come back, you'll be judged on your actions while out of contact. You all know how that would go. I shrugged. Why should I care? More than half of you believe me to be an unrepentant monster out for personal gain and most of the rest aren't too sure. I can speak only for Ariadu and our current allies. If the opportunity presented itself I was authorized to offer the following: financial and material support for rebuilding Mandalore or establishing a new capital world and primary industrial hub if the damage is too severe to fix in a reasonable amount of time. We'll provide low-interest loans both to the Mandalorian government and selected corporations designated by it. We'll give you what you need to make the Mandalorians the leading power in your sector of space, no questions asked. Tarkin admitted. Further, we'll lend you political support within the Senate. Damn, he has been busy when I wasn't looking. That heart-to-heart conversation between us just became a priority. I like the sound of that. If the Mid-Rim powers can offer the same trade concessions and loans, I'll take your idea under the strongest consideration. If you can get to an agreement tonight. Time's running out for us all. One way or another I'll need to get my fleets moving tomorrow evening at the latest. Minor repairs and distribution of supplies will be done by then. The only question is if we'll be heading back towards the core or if we'll try to do what we can here in the rim. So make up your minds one way or another. I looked at the politicians expectantly. Tarkin. What am I going to do with him? What he just offered was everything Mandalore sorely needed and currently could only get from the Republic. To sweeten the pot, if I wanted to get what Ariadu and company was offering, I would need to secure a mid-rim and then a corridor towards the eastern part of the galaxy. Criffing logistics. With almost 2 full sector fleets gathered here, I had the forces to go wild. Battle meditation could make up for the lack of training together, but the supply situation. My thoughts drifted to Tarkin's stunt at Darknell. Could we capture enough supplies to fuel our war machine? Perhaps. The one such instance I could recall on a large scale was back from my home world. It took incredible amounts of luck. It could have gone terribly wrong at a lot of points, but it actually worked until it didn't. Could I decline such an offer? I would need all the help I could get to build Mandalore as a galactic power, and coming home with something even more useful than a list of glorious victories would be great, vital even. I paid attention to the arguing people again. It would all be a moot point unless these fools actually agreed to the proposal and backed it with deeds, not only words, and that was a remote chance. No matter. I would think of a rough plan of action while the circus was ongoing. Who knew, I might get to make my luck again. =RK=. There was 2 more hours of arguing, which I ignored while busy examining a map of this region of the galaxy or reviewing situation reports from all around Naboo. My reinforcements had the Separatists' forces in Theed pinned down, and it was only a matter of time before the locals and Gar units within the city wiped them out. My minions and Rex managed to reach the battleship's reactor, and there was no real danger of the thing blowing us all into orbit. 2 whole regiments were fighting their way through the ship to clear it out of the enemy. Outside Theed the situation was stabilizing thanks to 4 acclimators providing close air support along with whole wings of fighters and bombers. The friendly casualties after the battleship landed were extreme, but there was no longer any danger from additional enemy units reaching the capital. Securing the rest of the planet would take time. However, if we could keep the Separatist from receiving reinforcements for the next month or 2, it would be a done deal without having to suffer too many casualties. That, however, looked more and more unlikely. The politicians continued to argue and were unable to agree on even a basic alliance meant only to oppose the Separatist with everything they had. In that case, why the hell would I risk myself and my people to help them? Bloody idiots. Perhaps that was for the better. I needed to go relieve Mandalore and then to Coruscant. I needed to see Bo with my own eyes, to hold her. The decision got made for us all, in a way that I didn't see coming. The Force stirred and the anticipation that was my constant companion since I arrived at Naboo spiked. One of the royal guards stiffened, then went to the Queen and whispered something to her. She frowned and nodded before fiddling with a panel expertly hidden in the armrests of her throne. It appears that we might be getting a message from Coruscant after all. Certainly not in a way we expected. A hologram came to life above us, and the face was that of a familiar Twi'lek. Shadowfeed? The Criff? This is Ryloth Risa on Shadowfeed, free people of the galaxy. Today we have a special treat to you courtesy to our rivals on Coruscant. The Twi'lek woman beamed cheerfully at the camera. For almost a month now, a dead man's switch set off by the death of the Sith Lord Chief Palpatine has been releasing the Senate's dirty little secrets all across the core. With the holonet across most of the galaxy not working properly because of the Republic's scorched earth policy, we at Shadowfeed decided that you need to see the truth for yourselves. Worry not, we'll show untampered recordings of every little misdeed and their proofs committed by the despicable Republic Senate. For those of you who worry that our glorious Confederate forces had sacked Coruscant because of the persistent silence coming from the Republic government, Risa smiled impishly. The truth is actually worse for any delusional Republic loyalist out there. There's a war going on, yet the Senate in their infinite wisdom has been unable to elect a new chancellor over the past month. You heard that right, gentle beings. I rubbed my temples. I had the unpleasant feeling that for once the separatist propaganda wasn't full of shit. The politicians who remained mostly agreed too, their discontent muttering and quiet curses soon filled in the chamber. When the supposed recorded transmissions from Coruscant began, there were enough indications that this might actually be genuine for us to pay attention. T was paying attention too, and I could clearly feel her horror at the situation. The Republic going to hell without my direct intervention, all because the Jedi jumped the gun? That was a horrifying revelation to my passenger. Huh? This part's true. I know for a fact Pops bribed the three of them. The hegemon looked thoughtful. I'm pretty sure my intelligence people were still bribing that Rhodian. At least a grain of truth then. The Queen's frown deepened. You know the Senate better than I do. If this is correct and such revelations has been going on for the past month, can the Republic continue to function? Can the Senate reach the needed majority to elect a new Chancellor? What's that about the clones going rogue? The Prime Minister interrupted. He was giving wary looks to my bodyguards. Not an issue. Every Jedi we encountered or knew of in the area are either dead, under arrest or cleared of any connections with the coup. Boomer answered. Can I speak freely, sir? He asked. To go on. I hadn't really thought about the effect Order 66 might have on the clones. If they wanted to go hunt Jedi, more power to them. I only hoped that Wind lived long enough so we could meet again. I owed him a galaxy worth of pain and I intended to deliver. If there were Jedi within reach, the nature of our training would demand that we go after them. The contingency orders are absolute and only an elected Chancellor can countermand them. As far as any of us know, there are only 3 Jedi left in this sector of space. They were apprehended as per Order 66 then cleared of wrongdoing by General Vale, so that's not an issue. However, if we learned of other Jedi, Boomer sighed, most of us would have to go after them and execute Order 66. Anyone attempting to interfere would be considered a traitor and treated accordingly. Incredulous silence met Boomer's words. Joy. I take it neither the Jedi, nor Gar High Command did their homework properly when they accepted the clone army? No questions asked? Yet, I didn't ask enough questions too, so I'm not one to judge, I grumbled. The worst thing, what Boomer told me made absolute sense. The clones' primary purpose was to purge the Jedi when the time came. Of course they would be indoctrinated to follow up on Order 66 no matter what. This changes things. If this is true, the Senate and Republic has been paralyzed for the past month. Tarkin groaned. The Gar too. It will be at least couple of weeks before the new recruits are fully ready for deployment and they will be green. I added. There won't be any help coming from the Corps for the time being. It would take the Gar months at the very least to fight its way here, and that's if the Gar can regain control of the clones in the Corps. With Jedi likely going to ground all over the place, it's going to be a complete mess. If that broadcast wasn't full of bantha fodder, yet Boomer's words made it awfully plausible. Besides, the primary target of the Navy and Army won't be relieving the Mid-Rim. They will be throwing everything they have at Fondor once the core is more or less secure. Criff the Force-cursed Jedi and whatever hell spawned them. Well, this seals it. The Republic won't be riding to the rescue anytime soon. What are we going to do? We have few realistic choices. Either suck it up and submit to the Separatists, go with Tarkin's creative idea, try our luck with neutrality, we all know how useful that's going to be, or resist on our own and get crushed for no gain at all. The hegemon shrugged. Look at the bright side. If this scheme works, it's going to give us what we came here for in the first place. How so? It will simply mean our annihilation. A CEO grumbled. Perhaps. The same is true if we rely on the Separatists' good intentions. An ambassador snorted. If General Vale can kick the enemy out from this part of the Mid-Rim, it would help not only us but the Republic as a whole. That has to be worth something. Let's talk terms. What does full cooperation means? How would we recover even if this madness pans out? Another Heth Guildmaster rumbled. We do have credits to burn and raw resources to offer. We'll be one of the primary targets after Naboo falls. Rintone's ambassador intoned quietly. My government had made its mind up some time ago. We'll fight. You have our support, General. Make good use of it. We would however require additional resources for our shipbuilding programs. We can do something about that. A Heth CEO nodded. Rogosta's in. It's not like Neurali has a choice. The Separatists don't appreciate us seeing them for what they are and standing against them. We're behind you, General. Senator Divinian intoned. Huh? They were actually agreeing on an alliance. This certainly blindsided me. Of course, now there was the little issue of following up on the agreements their mouths were writing. I might actually have to go on with this insanity. Criff it all. Just like that, instead of arguing the merits and dangers of Tarkin's proposal, everyone was discussing terms and what benefits they could bribe, threaten or extort of everyone else. I had to actually figure out how to prosecute a campaign across multiple sectors of space on a shoestring, logistics at best. I had to keep in mind that at least a few of those bastards were going to sell us out to the separatists and plan accordingly. Lucky me. How the criff did I get myself in this mess? Loot Force 1 = RK = Part 1. Another unlikely coincidence happened shortly after the Naboo Accords were signed, giving birth to the Mid-Rim Alliance. Two events happening thousands of light-years apart on the eve of General Vale's Rim campaign persist as a source of controversy and conspiracy theories. 20 years later, people all across the galaxy still believe that there's merit to the idea postulated by one Isla Renala from Kuwait. On the face of it, there was a perfectly good and reasonable explanation for what happened. Interrogation of captured ONI agents in the closing years of the Clone Wars reveals the reasons behind the accident on Coruscant used by Renala as a proof for his theory. It was not hard to figure out why Jedi remnant forces led the raid on Kuwait. A bit of hindsight and knowledge unavailable at the time was all it took to understand the reasons behind that attack. It wasn't until the conflict's resolution that it became clear that the Old Republic remnant used to be short on manpower and supplies. While they did expand through recruitment and training of people dissatisfied with the Republic all across the Rim, their material situation was much harder to fix. That's why the ORR leaders turned to the time-honored practice of capturing enemy hardware to turn against one's opponents. In hindsight, the only surprising thing about their actions was the chosen target and the sheer audacity of executing such a raid in one of the best defended systems in the galaxy. All the above led to the Rim campaign, and admittedly the parallels are startling. Some historians go as far as to call those events the greatest example of grand theft and piracy in the last 1,000 years. Others hail the same events as a benchmark for successful raids, sabotage and improvisation in the face of supposedly impossible odds. Taken in separation and context, each of these events makes perfect sense. Coruscant, it was an attempt to capture bleeding-edge Republic armor prototypes being shipped for extensive testing. It was a distraction too, meant to give an opening for two other ONI operations. Kuwait, the ORR faction allied with the CIS needed more capital ships of their own. They weren't satisfied with what the Confederacy could provide them with, nor with capturing ordinary Republic cruisers. Jedi Master Parian led multiple strike teams made of what little active Jedi and special forces he had left after Kamino, augmented by a battalion of commando droids in what remains to this day one of the most famous operations of the Clone Wars. Last but certainly not the least, the Rim campaign, an operation spanning thousands of ships on both sides, fighting across more than a dozen sectors, all made possible thanks to supplies the Republic forces under General Vale seized from the enemy. The campaign came awfully close to disaster multiple times and continues to be held as the example for the fact that sometimes insane military risk do pay off. At the time of the Clone Wars, those operations were seen in a different light. At least part of it is the lack of hindsight and information, combined with the first confirmed instance of Jedi Master Gerard Parian fighting in person. To someone living through those events, it would appear that a series of escalations happened and they had a lot in common, perhaps too much to dismiss it as merely a coincidence. It's easy to see where Renala came from, especially when it became clear what the long-term effects of those operations were. The Republic, various groups of Rouge Jedi and traitors, not to mention thanks to the ORR, the Confederacy were in somewhat better position to continue the war, despite various setbacks suffered by each group. However, it wasn't until the climatic clashes in the core and mid-rim on the eve of the Black Rebellion, we would see the true consequences of the raids in Vale's Rim campaign. Commodore Firmus Piet. Modern Naval Warfare Magazine. Sponsored by Kuwait Fleet Yards. =RK= LART Flight 035BJ97. En route to Shan Industrial Zone. Coruscant. Why did I agree to this? Mace Windu muttered to himself. Temporarily insanity. Though in your case I'll say it's permanent. Dooku smiled pleasantly at his one-time friend. If you want we can still drop you off and let you find your own way away from the clones. A female voice chirped. It came from an ONI agent clad from head to toe in a commando armor identical to what Republic Special Forces wore, making her gender hard to determine from a curious visual examination. That won't be necessary. The Count politely declined. You still haven't told us the extraction plan. It's above my pay grade. My team will be going out with the goods. You're supposed to go with Beta off-world. That's all I know. The operative shrugged. Alpha 1, Insight. Target comms are compromised. There won't be a distress call coming out for the first 5 to 10 minutes. Make sure you're in and out before the window closes. Heavy cloud cover and reflected thermals from the industrial zone will mask you from orbital surveillance in case you have to go loud. Over. Insight, Alpha 1, we'll do it quiet as long as our credentials hold. The woman responded. Over. Alpha 1, Insight. That's why Beta's playing Overwatch. Just get the package, make the transfer and be out in 10 at worst. Insight over and out. Get your helmets on and don't play with your lightsabers or Jedi tricks unless everything goes to hell, the operative ordered. Windu glared at her before catching himself and frowning. He took a series of deep breaths to calm himself before sealing in his helmet, making him outwardly indistinguishable from the other occupants of the vehicle minus Dooku, who smirked at the Jedi and only then covered his head. You do know we can't really pass for a group of clones, right? The Sith asked. While the arms and armor everyone wore was right, the differences in their height was a dead giveaway. There are enough non-clones authorized to wear this equipment on Coruscant. Even more after the bloody tank-born went rogue. The operative intoned. Alpha team, put your game faces on. We're beginning final approach in 30. RK equals. The two larks carrying one of ONI's direct action units flew towards the industrial plant where some Republic experimental equipment was produced. Air control challenged them, but let them pass after receiving the correct authentication and recognition codes. It was just another in the aftermath of the Jedi coup. Gar was going crazy with unscheduled inspections, last-minute additions to security details and whatever else troublesome brainstorm their little minds could cook up to show they weren't exactly useless. In a time-honored tradition, it was too little too late and only happened after the damage was done. At least that's what the night shift air controller at Victor Industries plant thought after going through the same damn thing for the third time that week alone. There was a whole company of those useless clones to augment the corporate security crawling all over the place. What more 2 lots worth of people could do, he had no idea. Well, besides more paperwork for him, because he had a bunch of forms to fill because the fools didn't bother to clear their arrival in advance. At least they were the real deal, all the codes said so. The controller sighed in exasperation and went to refill his CF. The paperwork could wait. RK equals. Part 2. Victor Industries Facility. Shan Industrial Zone. Coruscant. Alpha Team's insertion went in smoothly. Their credentials and passcodes were enough to land and reach the loading area without trouble. They even got a board guard to escort them there. Finding their target was easy too. There were only 2 light freighters docked inside and only one had heavy security. A platoon's worth of clones was stationed around it facing outwards. There had to be another platoon as a QRF nearby with the rest of the company playing perimeter security. Identify yourselves. A corporal flanked by a pair of troopers intercepted Alpha on their way to the transport. He barked his demand after glancing their way and determining that there was no way they could be clones. Major Winterhawk, Corellian Security Force on secondment to military intelligence. We're here to make sure certain cargo reaches its destination unmolested. Alpha 1 spoke in a bored tone and slowly uncapped a data pad from her harness. The clone stared at them for a few seconds before picking up the device and examining its contents. This is the first time I hear of this. Wait here while I check with command. The corporal gestured to his men who took a step forward to face the operatives. As long as it gets done before the freighter leaves. Alpha 1 shrugged without a care in the world. Lieutenant, we've got another bunch of unscheduled visitors. The corporal began speaking in his comm. LT, do you copy? Over. Sir? Check your comms. He ordered the privates. They did as instructed and couldn't get through. Alpha 1, Insight. You've got company. We detected an intrusion and had to kill their comms before the alarm went up. 5 to 10 minutes at best. Secure the objective. Beta's moving in. ETA 3 mics. I say again, go loud. Reinforcements ETA 3 mics. Insight out. Before Alpha 1's mind could register what was happening, the heads of the privates snapped back in sync and the back of their helmets exploded in pink mist. The corporal stood frozen for a moment, before dropping the data pad and diving for the floor. Snipers. Take cover. Alpha 1 snapped an order after she jumped to kiss the ground. She couldn't hear the shots over the cacophony of the working machinery in the loading area. However, the operative had a front row seat of the corporal's death. A bullet slammed into his chest plate with enough force to shatter it, and another hit him in the neck, producing a shower of blood. "They aren't shooting at us." Dooku intoned over the team's comms. "I don't sense any direct danger or hostility." "Do you want to tell us something, Commander?" the Sith asked. Pop smoke. "This isn't part of the plan. Into the transport, go." Alpha 1 snapped and followed her own orders. "Halt." A clone raised his blaster at the advancing operatives. Alpha 3 took him out with a double tap. "Good thing they don't have proper armors." "The QRF has them," Alpha 1 hissed. "This QRF?" Dooku asked mildly. A side ramp on the freighter went down and a squad of heavy troopers charged out, followed by a great many well-equipped soldiers. "Criff the plan." Alpha 4 grunted and dove for the questionable cover provided by a nearby stack of crates. Windu lasted no time. He let go of his blaster, summoned his lightsaber and jumped at the charging clones. Dooku shook his head and merely raised a hand and unleashed a torrent of purple lighting at the soldiers. "So much for keeping low profile." Alpha 1 snarled and went for her grenades. Ashe equals. Oni safe house. Coruscant. Insight, Gamma 1. Diversion is a go. Slicers in place. ETA 4 mics, over. Gamma 1, Insight. Well done. Make sure all primary packages make it. What about the secondary objective, over. Beta 1, Insight. Code black. Alpha needs immediate extraction. Go loud. We can give you 5 minutes of silence at best. Insight out. Our new friends are on Overwatch providing cover. They have their orders. We're recording everything and secondary is a go. Our old friends are engaging. Gamma 1, over. Good. Carry on, Gamma 1. Insight, out. Operative Thelmic, Insight. Status? Insight, I'm in position. No sight of the objective. Hold tight, Thelmic. Service the objective if it appears in the next 15 minutes, otherwise exfiltrate. Insight out. So far so good. Now let's see what's going to go horribly wrong tonight. A supposedly dead man whispered to himself. His eyes darted over multiple monitors where he could see the status of 3 separate operations he was coordinating that night. While very much real, the raid on Victor Industries was a grand diversion that with a bit of luck would make the other 2 missions possible. Even if they didn't pan out, this night's work already paid off. Once the footage taken by Gamma got uploaded to the Holonet, what little support the Jedi had in the core would be dead and buried, bar that coming from fanatics who simply wouldn't be swayed. If only the efforts to draw and quarter that Sith in the media over whatever happened at Kamino panned out, then it would be a very good week indeed. The intelligence operative sighed. Perhaps he should do something about Kenobi too. It was that man's support and need for proof that provided Vael a friendly voice that people would listen to. Perhaps drumming up the Mandalorian connection between the two of them? Besides, they were brothers-in-law now, so Obi-Wan supporting the Sith should be expected and his word shouldn't have as much weight it otherwise might. Insight, Beta 1. We're in and loud. We've got eyes on Alpha, they're getting into the freighter. We're going to escort them out, then cover their tracks. Do I have permission to sanitize the evidence? Beta 1, Insight. Permission granted. Just make sure all primary objectives are secure before the fireworks. Extraction variants 3 to 5 are still valid. Make sure the primaries leave Coruscant before sunrise. Insight, out. Gamma 1, Insight. Be advised, Beta is going to drop the hammer shortly. Status? Slicing in progress. ETA 1 mic and we're exfiltrating. We'll transmit the data before going to ground. Gamma 1, out.